Emily Carter tightened the straps of her worn-out backpack as she stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her pale blue eyes bore the weight of countless mornings like this one. She muttered to herself, "You're stronger than this," before exhaling sharply. The faint sounds of clinking dishes from the kitchen reminded her that her mother, Diane, was already up. Emily smoothed her chestnut-brown hair into a neat ponytail, adjusted her shirt, and left the bathroom, bracing for the day ahead. At Cedar Brook High, the hallways buzzed with chatter and laughter, none of which included Emily. She avoided eye contact, walking briskly to her locker. As she fumbled with the lock, the familiar sound of Jason's mocking voice echoed behind her. "Hey, Carter! What's the rush? Got to save the world today," he jeered, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Megan, his inseparable partner in torment, laughed as if on cue, tossing her perfectly styled blonde hair over her shoulder. Emily didn't respond. Her hands trembled slightly, but she focused on the dial of her lock until it finally clicked open. Jason leaned casually against the lockers beside her, his towering frame casting a shadow over her slight figure. "You know, Megan," he said loudly, "it's almost inspiring how she keeps coming back for more." Megan smirked, replying, "Yeah, it's like watching a broken record spin over and over." Their laughter stung, but Emily slammed her locker shut and walked away without looking back. The corridor seemed longer than usual, every step feeling like an eternity. Olivia, her best friend, intercepted her near the library. "Emily," Olivia whispered urgently, her dark curls bouncing as she fell into step beside her, "you can't keep letting them get to you." "I'm fine," Emily replied, her voice barely audible. "No, you're not," Olivia pressed, grabbing her arm gently. "I saw your face. You don't have to face this alone." Emily hesitated, but the bell rang, cutting their conversation short. In gym class, things escalated. After a grueling set of laps around the track, Emily leaned against the wall, gasping for air. Her legs felt like lead, her lungs burning. Jason and Megan appeared again, their timing cruelly impeccable. "Wow, Carter," Megan sneered, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of others. "No wonder the track team's losing time. You're hogging all the slowness." The comment was met with scattered giggles from nearby classmates. Emily clenched her fists, swallowing the lump forming in her throat. Jason joined in, mockingly wiping fake sweat from his brow. "Don't push yourself too hard, Carter. Wouldn't want you to collapse on us." Before Emily could respond, Mr. O'Donnell, the gym teacher, emerged from the equipment room. "Enough. Both of you," he barked, glaring at Jason and Megan. "Get back to the track." Reluctantly, they walked off, but not without sharing one last snicker. Emily lingered in the locker room after class, staring blankly at her reflection in the small, grimy mirror above the sink. Her mind raced with the insults she couldn't shake. A knock on the door startled her. "Emily!" Olivia's voice came through. Emily quickly wiped her eyes and opened the door. "I'm fine," Emily said again, but Olivia wasn't convinced. At home, the atmosphere wasn't much better. Diane sat at the kitchen table, her head in her hands, surrounded by stacks of bills. She looked up as Emily entered. "Hey, honey," she said, forcing a smile. "How was school?" Emily shrugged, avoiding the question. "It was okay." Diane sighed. "You know you can talk to me, right?" Emily wanted to pour out everything. Jason, Megan, the constant ridicule, but the sight of Diane's furrowed brow and the worry lines deepening around her eyes stopped her. "I'm just tired," Emily said instead. Later that evening, as Diane continued to pore over finances, Emily retreated to her room. Her gaze fell on an old photograph on her desk. It was of her at age 10, standing proudly in a swimsuit next to her father at the local pool. He had taught her to swim, his mantra always the same: "The water washes away what weighs you down." Inspired by the memory, Emily decided to visit the community pool after school the next day. The thought of swimming again filled her with a flicker of hope. The pool smelled of chlorine and nostalgia. Emily approached the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "Hi, I'd like to sign up for swimming lessons," Emily said, her voice steady. "Of course," the receptionist replied, handing her a form. Coach Harris is great with beginners and returning swimmers alike. First lessons tomorrow at 5 a.m. Emily blinked. 5 a.m. Early bird gets the worm, the receptionist said with a wink. The next morning, long before sunrise, Emily stood at the edge of the pool, shivering slightly in her swimsuit. Coach Harris, a wiry man in his 50s, approached her. "You're Emily, right?" She nodded, her nerves visible. "Good," he said with a grin. "Let's see what you've got." The first few laps were grueling. Emily's strokes were uneven, her breathing erratic. But with each length of the pool, she felt a shift. The water was cold, but it wasn't just washing over her, it was washing away her doubts, her fears, her pain. "You've got potential," Coach Harris said after the session, handing her a towel. "If you stick with it, I think you'll surprise yourself." For the first time in months, Emily felt a genuine smile forming on her lips. As she walked out of the pool that morning, the world seemed a little less heavy, and for once, she wasn't dreading the day ahead. This was just the beginning. She didn't know it yet, but the decision to dive into that pool would ripple through her life in ways she could never have imagined. Emily's alarm blared at 4:30 the next morning, cutting through the silence of her dimly lit bedroom. Groggy but determined, she dragged herself out of bed, her muscles still sore from the previous day's session. In the kitchen, Diane was already up, sipping her coffee and reviewing another stack of bills. "You're up early again," Diane remarked, her tired eyes flicking toward Emily. "Swimming," Emily replied simply as she grabbed a protein bar from the counter. Diane raised an eyebrow. "Swimming? Since when?" "Just started." "Thought it might help," Emily said, not offering more. Diane didn't press her, though her expression softened briefly with a glimmer of approval. The crisp morning air stung Emily's cheeks as she biked to the pool. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the occasional hum of a passing car. Upon arriving, she was greeted by the sharp scent of chlorine and the familiar sight of Coach Harris pacing the pool deck. "Morning, Emily," Coach said, nodding approvingly. "Ready for round 2?" She nodded, shedding her hoodie and stepping cautiously into the cold water. The training was brutal. Her arms ached, her legs burned, and her lungs felt like they were on fire. Yet, with every lap, Emily felt a growing sense of resilience. By the time she climbed out of the pool, the sun was beginning to rise, casting a warm glow across the facility. "You've got grit," Coach Harris said as he handed her a towel. "Keep this up, and you might just make a swimmer out of yourself." Emily smiled faintly, feeling the weight of his words. For once, someone wasn't mocking her or doubting her abilities, they were acknowledging her effort. At school, her newfound determination didn't go unnoticed. Jason and Megan, always watching for an opportunity to antagonize her, seemed to sense the subtle shift in Emily's demeanor. In the cafeteria, as she quietly ate her lunch, they approached her table. "Well, well," Jason said, dropping into the seat across from her. "You've been busy. Heard you've been playing mermaid at the pool. What's the matter? The chess club kick you out?" Megan leaned on the table, her manicured nails tapping rhythmically. "Trying to impress someone, Carter? Hate to break it to you, but nobody's watching." Emily, still riding the high of her morning swim, looked up at them for the first time in months. "I'm not doing it for anyone else," she said evenly, her voice steady. Jason blinked, caught off guard by her response. Megan, however, recovered quickly. "Cute. Just don't get any ideas about, being good at it." Before Emily could respond, Olivia appeared at her side. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice laced with defiance. Jason rolled his eyes and stood. "No problem," he muttered, grabbing Megan's arm and walking away. "You okay?" Olivia asked, sitting down beside Emily. Emily nodded, though her hands were trembling slightly under the table. "I didn't let them get to me," she said, almost as if reassuring herself. "You did great," Olivia said firmly. "But they're not going to stop unless you show them they can't mess with you anymore." After school, Emily returned to the pool for another session. Coach Harris noticed her sullen expression and pulled her aside. "Tough day?" he asked, his sharp eyes scanning her face. "Something like that," Emily admitted, shrugging. He nodded thoughtfully. Let me tell you something. When I was your age, I had to fight for everything I wanted. Everyone said I'd never make it as a swimmer. Too small, too slow. But you know what? I proved them wrong. Emily looked up at him, her curiosity piqued. How? By showing up, he said simply. Every day. No matter what they said, no matter how I felt. I showed up and gave it my all. And eventually, they couldn't deny it anymore. His words resonated deeply. That evening, as Emily biked home, she repeated them in her head like a mantra. At dinner, Diane noticed Emily's unusually quiet demeanor. Something on your mind? She asked. I think I found something I'm good at, Emily said after a pause. Diane set down her fork, looking at her daughter intently. That's wonderful, honey. You've been working so hard. I'm proud of you. Emily's chest tightened. It had been a long time since she'd heard those words. The next day, during a free period, Jason and Megan cornered Emily near the lockers. This time, Jason's tone was sharper. What's your deal, Carter? Trying to make a scene with your little swimming stunt. Emily sighed, keeping her voice calm. Why do you care so much about what I do? Megan scoffed. Because you're pathetic, that's why. You can't just start acting like you're better than everyone. I'm not better than anyone, Emily said, her voice firm. But I'm not less than anyone either. Her words echoed in the corridor, drawing the attention of nearby students. Jason shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting an audience. Megan's face flushed, but before she could retort, Olivia appeared again, standing protectively beside Emily. You heard her, Olivia said, glaring at them. Back off. Jason muttered something under his breath and walked away, Megan trailing behind him. Later, at the pool, Emily recounted the incident to Coach Harris during a break. He chuckled, shaking his head. Sounds like you're finding your voice, kid. That's half the battle. Emily smiled, feeling a small but significant spark of confidence. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was fighting back. By the end of the week, Emily had settled into her new routine. Early mornings at the pool, long days at school, and evenings spent juggling homework and helping Diane. It was exhausting, but it felt purposeful. One evening, as she packed her bag for the next day's swim, Diane came into her room. I got this for you, she said, handing Emily a small box. Inside was a sleek new swimsuit, the kind professional swimmers wore. Emily's eyes widened. Mom, this must have cost. Don't worry about that, Diane interrupted, smiling. You're working hard. You deserve it. Emily hugged her tightly, her throat tightening with emotion. Thanks, Mom. As she lay in bed that night, clutching the swimsuit, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. For the first time, the path ahead didn't seem so daunting. She was ready to face whatever came next. The news spread faster than Emily anticipated. By the time she walked into school Monday morning, whispers about her participation in the upcoming swimming competition were already circulating. A mix of surprise, mockery, and reluctant curiosity followed her through the corridors. Did you hear about Carter? She's trying out for the swim team, someone muttered near the lockers. Yeah, right, another voice replied. She probably thinks splashing around a pool will make her popular. Emily kept her head high, ignoring the comments. It wasn't about them. She had come too far to let their words deter her now. Later that day, the announcement of the competition was posted on the bulletin board outside the gym. The Cedarbrook High Invitational would be held in 3 weeks, featuring various sports, including swimming. Emily's name was listed alongside seasoned athletes, which raised more eyebrows. Megan noticed it immediately. Unbelievable, she scoffed to Jason as they passed the board. Who does she think she is? Jason frowned but didn't reply. His thoughts were clouded with an unusual frustration. At home, his father's relentless expectations of perfection in basketball were starting to wear him down. The comparison between his own struggles and Emily's sudden rise irritated him. That afternoon, Emily pushed herself harder than ever in the pool. Coach Harris had increased her training regimen, introducing drills that tested her stamina and precision. Midway through practice, as Emily reached the wall, her leg cramped painfully. She gasped, flailing for a moment before Coach Harris dove in, pulling her to safety. "Easy, easy," he said as she clung to the edge of the pool, her face pale. "I'm fine," Emily insisted through gritted teeth, trying to massage the cramp out. "You're overdoing it," he said firmly. "This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. You need to pace yourself or you'll burn out before the competition even starts." Emily nodded reluctantly, realizing he was right. She couldn't afford to jeopardize everything she had worked for. The school began buzzing with anticipation as the invitational drew closer. Posters were plastered across the hallways, and students speculated about who would take home the trophies. Jason and Megan continued their reign as the school's star athletes, dominating conversations about basketball and cheerleading. But Emily's name had started to crop up in unexpected places. "Do you think she'll even make it through the first heat?" someone asked during lunch. "She's a joke," Megan replied sharply. But her confidence wavered as she recalled Emily's quiet determination during gym class. In the days leading up to the internal competitions, Cedarbrook organized trial matches for various teams to showcase their progress. Emily's first test came during one of these events. The pool was crowded with spectators, students, teachers, and parents. As Emily took her place on the starting block, the chatter in the room grew louder. She could hear scattered laughter and whispers, but forced herself to focus on the water ahead. Olivia waved at her from the stands, her presence a reassuring anchor. The whistle blew, and Emily dove in. The water engulfed her, its familiar chill sharpening her senses. She moved with precision, each stroke cutting through the pool. By the final lap, she was neck and neck with another swimmer, someone far more experienced. Drawing on every ounce of strength, she surged forward and touched the wall a fraction of a second ahead. The crowd erupted into a mix of surprised cheers and reluctant claps. Emily pulled herself out of the pool, panting but exhilarated. Coach Harris beamed from the sidelines. "You just set a personal best," he said, clapping her on the back. "That's what I'm talking about." Jason and Megan, watching from the edge of the gym, exchanged a glance. For the first time, they seemed unsure of themselves. At home, Jason's father was less impressed. "What's this I hear about you struggling on the court?" he demanded after practice one evening. "I'm not struggling," Jason snapped, slamming his water bottle onto the counter. "Then why is some girl everyone used to laugh at suddenly getting more attention than you?" his father shot back. Jason stormed out of the room, his frustration bubbling into resentment. Megan, meanwhile, faced criticism from her own circle. During a routine cheerleading practice, one of her teammates mentioned Emily's name. "She's kind of inspiring, don't you think?" the girl said hesitantly. "Inspiring?" Megan repeated, her voice sharp. "She's pathetic. Just because she managed to swim a little faster doesn't mean she's worth anything." But later that night, Megan found herself replaying Emily's performance in her head. There had been something undeniably impressive about her focus and determination, and it unsettled Megan in ways she didn't fully understand. For Emily, the small victory at the trials was only a stepping stone. Coach Harris's training intensified, pushing her limits but also building her resilience. Olivia, ever supportive, spent afternoons helping Emily balance schoolwork and training. "You've got this," Olivia said one evening as they studied together. "No matter what happens at the competition, you've already proven so much." As the invitational approached, Emily's nerves began to fray. She struggled with bouts of anxiety, her mind plagued by memories of Jason and Megan's bullying. During one particularly rough evening, Olivia found her sitting by the pool after practice, staring into the water. "I don't think I can do this," Emily admitted, her voice trembling. "Yes, you can," Olivia said firmly. "You've already done more than anyone expected. This isn't just about swimming, it's about showing yourself what you're capable of." Emily nodded, drawing strength from her friend's unwavering belief in her. The day before the competition, the school buzzed with last-minute preparations. Teachers wished their athletes good luck, while students filled the hallways with nervous energy. For Emily, it felt surreal to be part of the conversation. That evening, as she packed her bag, Diane walked into her room holding a small box. "I almost forgot," Diane said, handing it to her. Inside was a silver bracelet with a simple charm shaped like a wave. "It was your dad's idea," Diane said, her voice soft. "He thought it might bring you luck someday." Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. "Thanks, Mom," she whispered. As she lay in bed that night, Emily took a deep breath and closed her eyes. The journey had been anything but easy, but tomorrow she would dive into the water with everything she had. This wasn't just about winning, it was about reclaiming her strength, one stroke at a time. The tension in the school gymnasium was palpable as the day of the Cedarbrook Invitational unfolded. Students and parents filled the stands, their voices a cacophony of cheers, chatter, and competitive taunts. Emily Carter stood near the pool, adjusting her swim cap with trembling hands. The air was thick with chlorine and anticipation. Jason sat in the bleachers, pretending to scroll through his phone. His teammates were joking around, but his attention kept drifting to the pool. He tried to shake the unease settling in his chest. Megan, meanwhile, was further down, her group of cheerleaders buzzing with excitement. Still, her eyes occasionally flicked toward Emily, a mixture of skepticism and something she couldn't quite name clouding her usual bravado. As the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, introducing the swimmers for the first event, Emily felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. She glanced at Coach Harris, who stood on the sidelines with his arms crossed and a reassuring nod. "Focus on your lane," he had told her repeatedly during training. "It's not about them. It's about you." The whistle blew, signaling the start of her heat. Emily climbed onto the starting block, her toes gripping the edge. The crowd noise faded into a dull hum, and all she could hear was the pounding of her heart. "Take your marks," the announcer commanded. Emily bent forward, her muscles coiled like springs. The buzzer sounded, and she launched into the water, the world above disappearing into a blur of splashes and distant cheers. Every stroke felt calculated, her breathing synchronized with the rhythm she'd practiced countless times. She wasn't the fastest, but her technique was precise. As she hit the wall and emerged from the pool, gasping for air, a ripple of applause broke out. She glanced at the scoreboard. She hadn't won, but her time was enough to qualify for the next round. Relief washed over her, followed by a surge of pride. Back in the locker room, Megan leaned against the counter, watching the other cheerleaders fix their makeup. She wasn't one to let doubt creep in, but something about Emily's persistence gnawed at her. She replayed the heat in her mind, the way Emily had powered through despite being the clear underdog. "Hey, Megan," one of her friends called, snapping her out of her thoughts. "Are we going to the cafeteria after this?" Megan nodded absently, her mind elsewhere. Meanwhile, Jason found himself in an unfamiliar position. For years, he had been the star, the one everyone looked up to, or feared. But now, watching Emily claw her way out of the shadows, he felt an unexpected pang of guilt. He didn't know what to make of it, but he couldn't deny the growing respect for her determination. As the competition continued, the events grew more intense. The stakes were higher, the races tighter. Emily's performance was far from perfect, but with each heat, she improved, shaving seconds off her time. She noticed the subtle changes in the crowd, fewer whispers of doubt, more scattered cheers of encouragement. During a break between events, Megan approached Emily near the concession stand. It was an unusual sight. Megan, with her polished confidence, standing before Emily with an awkward stiffness. "You were pretty good out there," Megan said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. Emily blinked, unsure if she had misheard. "Thanks," she said cautiously. Megan hesitated, then added, "Look, I know we haven't exactly been nice to you. I just wanted to say, good luck." Emily studied Megan's face, searching for insincerity, but found none. "Thanks," she repeated, this time with a small smile. The encounter left both girls unsettled, each grappling with emotions they weren't prepared to confront. Jason's reckoning came later that evening, during a conversation with his father. The elder man's criticism of Emily had reignited Jason's anger, but this time it wasn't directed at her. "She's just some desperate kid trying to prove something," his father scoffed. "She's working harder than anyone I've ever seen," Jason snapped, surprising even himself. His father raised an eyebrow. "And what does that say about you?" Jason stormed out, slamming the door behind him. For the first time, he began to question not only his treatment of Emily, but also the expectations that had been thrust upon him his entire life. As the final events of the day approached, the energy in the gym was electric. Emily's heart raced as she prepared for her last heat, a relay event. Her teammates were seasoned swimmers, and she felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. "Just do your best," one of them said, patting her on the shoulder. "We'll handle the rest." When it was her turn, Emily dove into the pool with everything she had left. The water embraced her like an old friend, and she moved with a fluidity that felt almost effortless. By the time she reached the wall and tagged the next swimmer, her team was in second place, a position they maintained until the end of the race. Though they didn't win, the sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. As Emily climbed out of the pool, the applause was louder than ever. For the first time, she felt seen, not as the quiet girl in the background, but as someone worthy of recognition. In the stands, Megan clapped hesitantly, her usual smirk replaced by a thoughtful expression. Jason stood nearby, his hands shoved into his pockets. "She's something else, huh?" Olivia said, appearing beside him. Jason nodded slowly. "Yeah, she is." By the end of the night, Emily's performance had left a mark on everyone who witnessed it. The competition was over, but the ripples of her effort would continue to spread, challenging perceptions and inspiring change in ways none of them could have anticipated. The atmosphere at Cedarbrook High shifted in ways Emily Carter hadn't expected. Where once she had felt invisible or ridiculed, now she noticed quiet nods of acknowledgement from classmates. Some even stopped her in the hallways to say, "Good job at the Invitational." Though the words were few, their sincerity was unmistakable. For the first time in years, Emily walked through the corridors without feeling entirely alone. Her impact wasn't confined to the swimming pool. In classes, teachers began using her story as an example of perseverance. During a math lesson, Mr. Peterson paused mid-equation and said, "Take Emily Carter, for instance. She didn't give up, even when everyone doubted her. That's what persistence looks like." Emily blushed as heads turned toward her, but she felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest, a growing sense of pride. The cultural shift extended beyond Emily. Inspired by her courage, students who had been quietly struggling began stepping into the spotlight. Sarah, a shy girl in Emily's literature class, signed up to recite her poetry during a school assembly. Michael, a self-proclaimed introvert, joined the debate team. Emily's determination had become a catalyst for others to embrace their own potential. Meanwhile, Olivia took her support of Emily to the next level. She founded a small group for students struggling with self-esteem, calling it the Ripple Effect. Emily was a guest speaker at their first meeting, standing nervously in front of a dozen students. "I was scared every single day," Emily admitted, her voice steady but soft. "But I learned something. Fear doesn't go away. You just get stronger. You just keep swimming." The room erupted into applause, and Emily felt a lump form in her throat. Diane, too, found herself inspired by Emily's newfound resilience. One evening, after watching a documentary about family dynamics and mental health, she approached the school administration with a proposal to start a support group for parents. It was a small step, but one she felt could make a difference for families like hers. Not everyone embraced the changes so quickly. Megan's transformation was a quiet, tentative process. She began showing up at swim meets, not as a heckler but as a spectator. During lunch one day, she surprised everyone at her table by defending Emily when someone made a snide remark. "She's not what you think," Megan said firmly. "You don't know how hard she's worked." Jason's evolution was more internal. Haunted by his father's harsh words and his own behavior, he started helping younger players on the basketball team during practices. At first, it felt like a distraction from his guilt, but over time, it became something more, a genuine effort to be better. One afternoon, Jason found himself crossing paths with Emily outside the library. She was carrying a stack of books, her face flushed from the effort. Without thinking, he stepped in. "Here, let me help," he said, taking half the load. Emily blinked, startled. "Thanks," she said cautiously. They walked in silence for a moment before Jason spoke again. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low. "For everything." Emily glanced at him, searching for sarcasm, but found none. "It's okay," she said eventually. "I mean, it wasn't okay, but I'm moving forward." Jason nodded, relieved but still unsure how to express the full weight of his regret. As the days turned into weeks, the school began implementing new policies to address bullying and promote inclusivity. The administration organized assemblies featuring guest speakers and workshops, with Emily's story as a focal point. Though she felt uncomfortable being in the spotlight, Emily understood the importance of sharing her journey. Her swimming practices intensified as well. Coach Harris pushed her harder, preparing her for upcoming state-level competitions. Despite the physical toll, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose each time she dove into the water. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, she sat on the edge of the pool, her legs dangling in the water. Megan appeared, hesitating before sitting beside her. "You were amazing today," Megan said, breaking the silence. "Thanks," Emily replied, surprised by the compliment. Megan fidgeted with the hem of her jacket. "I know I've been awful to you. For a long time. I don't know why you're even talking to me right now." Emily shrugged. "People change. At least, I think they can." Megan nodded, her eyes misting over. "I'm trying. I really am." The two girls sat quietly, the hum of the pool's filtration system filling the space between them. The changes in Cedarbrook High weren't just personal, they were systemic. Diane's parent support group gained traction, bringing together families who shared similar struggles. Olivia's ripple effect meetings grew in popularity, providing a safe space for students to express themselves. Even the school's athletic department began emphasizing collaboration over competition, with Jason leading a series of cross-sport workshops. By the end of the semester, the school felt different, lighter, more unified. And though Emily didn't see herself as the reason, others did. "She started this," Olivia said during one of their late-night study sessions. "You didn't just change your life, Emily. You changed all of ours." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She still had challenges ahead, but for the first time, she believed in her ability to overcome them. Together with her friends and the support of her school, she was ready to face whatever came next. The day of the state swimming finals arrived with a crisp chill in the air, the early morning sun casting long shadows across the aquatic center. Emily stood in the locker room, tying the strings of her sleek competition suit, her hands trembling slightly. Around her, other swimmers adjusted goggles, stretched, and exchanged nervous banter. Emily stayed quiet, focused, her mind running through every drill and lesson she had practiced over the past months. Outside, the stands were filling quickly. The energy in the air was palpable, a mix of excitement and tension. Diane sat near the front, clutching a thermos of coffee, her knuckles white against the metal. Beside her, Olivia waved a handmade sign that read, "You've already won, Emily." The gesture made Diane smile, even as her nerves refused to settle. Megan and Jason arrived moments later, surprising Olivia with their presence. Megan carried a banner that read, "Team Emily," while Jason held a bundle of balloons in school colors. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Don't look so shocked," Megan said with a faint grin. "She deserves this." Jason nodded, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "Yeah, she does." As Emily emerged from the locker room, she was greeted by the sight of her supporters in the stands. Her heart swelled, but she quickly refocused as Coach Harris approached, clipboard in hand. "Finals 100-meter freestyle," he reminded her. "Short and fast. Stick to your pace, and don't panic if someone pulls ahead early." Emily nodded, though her pulse quickened. The sound of the announcer calling her name echoed through the space, jolting her into motion. She stepped onto the pool deck, the roar of the crowd muffled by the sound of her own heartbeat. Her competitors lined up alongside her, each radiating a quiet intensity. As they climbed onto the starting blocks, Emily's eyes flicked to her lane, the blue water beneath her rippling faintly. "Take your marks," the official commanded, his voice sharp. Emily bent forward, her body coiled like a spring. The buzzer sounded, and she launched into the water. The first few strokes were chaos. Splashes from neighboring lanes and the roar of the crowd blurred her senses. But as she settled into her rhythm, the noise faded. Her muscles burned, her lungs ached, but she pushed forward, each stroke driving her closer to the wall. At the halfway point, Emily noticed she was in third place. Panic threatened to creep in, but she remembered Coach Harris's advice. She kept her focus, her movements deliberate and efficient. The final stretch came down to sheer willpower. Emily's arms felt like lead, but she refused to slow down. As she approached the wall, she gave everything she had, her fingers stretching forward as she touched the finish with a forceful slap. The arena erupted in cheers and gasps. Emily surfaced, blinking against the water as she turned to the scoreboard. Her name lit up beside a silver medal icon, second place. A wave of emotion hit her as she climbed out of the pool. Her chest heaved, both from exertion and disbelief. Diane was on her feet, tears streaming down her face. Olivia screamed her name, and even Jason and Megan were clapping wildly, their banner waving above the crowd. "You did it, kid!" Coach Harris exclaimed, gripping her shoulder. "You earned every bit of this." The medal ceremony was a blur. As the announcer called her name, Emily stepped onto the podium, the silver medal draped around her neck. The crowd's applause was deafening, but all she could think about was how far she had come. After the ceremony, Emily was mobbed by her friends and family. Diane pulled her into a tight hug, whispering, "Your dad would be so proud." Olivia laughed through tears, and even Jason managed a sheepish smile. "You proved us all wrong," he said. "I wasn't trying to," Emily replied, her voice soft. "That's what makes it even better," he said with a grin. Megan approached last, her expression hesitant but sincere. "You're incredible, Emily. I mean that." "Thank you," Emily said, her voice steady. As they left the aquatic center, the weight of the day began to settle. Emily realized her victory wasn't just the medal. It was the journey, the people she had inspired, and the transformation within herself. She glanced at the silver charm bracelet on her wrist, the wave symbol gleaming in the evening light. She had faced the currents and come out stronger. For the first time, Emily felt truly unstoppable. If you enjoyed the story and want to see more content like this, support the channel by subscribing, liking, and turning on notifications.